I'm Dr. Pat, clinical psychologist and a charter member of the Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals. We are joined tonight by our Facebook audience and those who may be joining us by Zoom. Welcome to Series 4 of AABPP's Town Hall meetings that we have been offering to the Black community since May 2020. The theme that we have addressed these town hall meetings has been navigating the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and racism. And tonight's topic is resilience in the face of trauma. Resilience in the face of trauma. We're very fortunate to have our guest tonight, the Reverend Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver, and the Reverend retired Judge Marion Humphrey, both bivocational and no strangers to Little Rock, the state, and the nation. They roll on the national scene. So we are very privileged to have them tonight with the busy schedules that they maintain. They will address this timely theme of resilience in the face of trauma. By way of introduction, Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver is from Little Rock, has a Master of Science, a Master of Social Work from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, a Master of Arts in Biblical Counseling with a concentration in Christian education from Dallas Theological Seminary, and a PhD in family therapy from Texas Women's University. In 2018, Dr. Bell Tolliver retired as Associate Professor of Social Work from the University of Arkansas and holds the position of Associate Professor Emeritus. She is currently a subcontractor with HLH Consultants in North Little Rock, where she provides individual couples and therapy to families. She is a licensed certified social worker in the state of Arkansas, a registered play therapist supervisor, and a clinical member of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Throughout the years, Dr. Bell Tolliver has worked in the fields of mental health, child protective services, and in private practice in Dallas and in Arkansas. Currently, she serves on the board of Freedom for Youth, which is a nonprofit organization in Helena, West Helena, which is dedicated to empowering young people and families. She also has worked in the prison reentry area on the advisory board at the Pine Bluff unit. She is on the board of Arkansas Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program Committee, and this is an appointment by the Arkansas Supreme Court. I mentioned that both of our guests tonight are bivocational. Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver is a pastor. She is currently assigned to Pleasant Hill Christian Methodist Episcopal Church in College Station. She is an ordained deacon, an elder within the Christian Methodist and Episcopal Church, serves as coordinator for the First Episcopal CME District and Child Evangelism Fellowship, and an international ministry for children. Pardon me, Dr. Bell Tolliver, I stopped at nation. You're international. She is the author of several professional articles and book chapters, and in 2017 edited the book, The First 25, an oral history of the desegregation of Little Rock's public junior high schools. Welcome, Dr. Bell Tolliver. I think I could have written the introduction for the Reverend Judge Marion Humphrey, because we have a long history, but I didn't want to do that. I asked him to submit an official bio for his introduction tonight. Currently, Reverend Humphrey serves as pastor of the Allison Presbyterian Church here in Little Rock, is a retired circuit court judge for Pulaski and Perry counties. He is a graduate of Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire, received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Princeton University, a Master of Divinity degree from Harvard University in Cambridge, and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. Judge Reverend Humphrey was elected to the position of circuit judge in 1992. He served prior as a municipal judge and was in private practice. He's currently in private practice. He served as Little Rock Assistant City Attorney and Arkansas Assistant Secretary General, the Arkansas State Director for Prison Fellowship, an Associate Minister at Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Boston. He was a newspaper reporter, copy editor for the Pine Bluff Commercial, served as research assistant in the office of former Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm of New York, U.S. House of Representatives in DC, was an intern in the office of former Senator J. William Fulbright of Arkansas, also in DC. He's a member of the Arkansas Judicial Council, the Arkansas Bar Association, the Pulaski County Bar Association, the W. Harold Flowers Law Society, and is life member of both the National Bar Association and the NAACP. He currently serves on the boards of, he formerly served on the boards of Arkansas Children's Hospital, the Vero Lord Presbyterian Family Services in Monticello, Lyon College at Batesville, Johnson C. Smith Seminary, and the Interdenominational Theological Center, both in Atlanta. He is a former president of the Christian Alliance, Ministerial Alliance in Little Rock, and I think both Dr. Bell Tolliver and Reverend Judge Humphrey work in that alliance together. He's chaplain of the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association, previously served on the Arkansas Supreme Court Committee on Criminal Practice. He is married to the former Benita Gloria Thomas of Tolette, and they are the proud parents of Marion Andrew Humphrey Jr., who is now his law partner. Just another connection between the two of them, just this past summer with the recent bar results, Dr. Bell Tolliver celebrated her granddaughter's passing the bar, and Reverend Judge Humphrey celebrated his son's passing the bar. So they have a history together. They work together in the community, and now the next generation is working together from this dynamic duo that we have tonight. Thank you both again for being our guests. We look forward to what you will be sharing with us. We have several who are joining us, and this session, this presentation is being recorded. We can listen to it again on the AABPP Facebook page and also on the AABPP YouTube page. It seems as if for the past year and 7 to 8 months, we have been living through a tsunami with layers and layers of trauma, collective, generational, complex, you name it. We have seen and experienced situations that we never thought that we would be experiencing after being here in America over 4 centuries. Yet we're no strangers to trauma. When we first came to America as enslaved individuals, we came through trauma, but somehow we have survived. We have sustained our existence through complex trauma. Tonight, we want to hear from you. You have worked on the front lines with families, with individuals, with systems in multiple ways. And we're looking forward to what you can share with us about resilience as a protective factor as we carry on through the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and racism. Dr. Bell Tolliver, let's start with you. If you would unmute and share some opening comments, and then we'll hear from the Reverend Judge Humphrey. And those of you who are listening by Zoom or Facebook, please feel free to put your questions in the chat because we want this to be interactive. Thank you.
Well, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you this evening. And in just the opening statements, I just really want to briefly reiterate something that you said, Dr. Griffin, which is so important as we consider this complex issue, that trauma is not something that is new to us as a people of African origin. Some years ago, as I was doing some research on trauma and for an article, I looked at the definition of resilience in the face of trauma. And for individuals, it's the capacity to rebound from adversity, misfortune, trauma, or other transitional crises, strengthened and more resourceful than in the past. And from a family perspective, it's the family's ability to survive and even thrive in the face of adversity and adverse situations. And you are correct. I do look at trauma from that systems perspective. When we are looking at this, I'm going to share just really briefly a something that I want to explore with you. And let me see if I can do this from the slide perspective. When we're looking at a resilience framework, I do like to look at it from the systems perspective. And these are just some of the systems that are involved when we're looking at the family system. As we consider this, we think about who all is involved in that. And we consider the extended family, the nuclear family from the very beginning, and then all of the other avenues and subsystems that impact the individual and the family's life. I want to emphasize that in the face of current trauma, we're looking at especially the impact of employment. Many people were unemployed during this time. And then some people were transitioned home where they were able to work from home. For them, it might not have been as big of an issue as those who were completely out of jobs for a while. For students and children, then there was the impact on the educational system. As we look at religion and spirituality, we look at how religion and spirituality can support resilience by exploring those values and behaviors that people receive through their placing their faith in, well, I would say in God. Some people would consider from that spiritual perspective a higher power or whatever they believe in. From a pastoral perspective, I certainly hope it is the one true God. As we look at other protective factors, whether it's social systems, as well as different types of resources or supports they have, from a person who is working with, right now I work with families referred by the court. This is a serious concern when you have few resources and few options. Time is a critical issue. We talked about from a generational perspective, we've all, from an African-oriented point of view, received some type of impact over time from previous generations, but even from the pandemic, which is still going on. Some people tend to forget that it's still happening even right now, unless their families are impacted. And then from that cultural perspective, we look again at the values and beliefs that have been passed down from generations into our own families, our own systems. what are our expectations that our nuclear and extended family have on us? What are expectations that our culture has on us, or that our social support networks have on us? And then that crucial statement, that adaptability, even from Robert Hill, we talk about that adaptability. How flexible are you? How willing are you to explore new options? We had to do a lot of that in our churches just recently. I'm going to rush through this as we look at other kinds of things that happen. But for parents, I do want to highlight that parenting quality. What is the quality of the parenting that is going on? What changed during the pandemic time? And now that children have transitioned back to school, and then adversity hits you. After all of those, the most recent adverse situations, I look at this from a long-term perspective as opposed to uh, uh, this just happened kind of point of view, because we have all experienced something over time. And then finally, I wanted to highlight something that I found stated a little while ago. Your academic success is or is not important during the pandemic. That's a message that we have to look at. What message was sent to children by way of parents, school districts, other kinds of situations, and that impacts a person's ability to be resilient, because some people might even consider last year in particular to be a lost year for many people who were not effectively supported by their academic institutions. I'll stop there, and then we'll come back later on for questions and comments.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. And if you would permit, we would like to post that final frame on our Facebook page because that was a very comprehensive overview of how systems interact to strengthen, to help to build resilience. And we will return to that. You made a lot of points that I want to address during the Q&A. But yes, if we may, we would like to share that slide on our Facebook page. And of course, it was on the YouTube. Thank you. Reverend Judge Humphrey, let us hear from you on this general theme before we delve into it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. When I think about resilience in our community, I think about the context of growing up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, the adaptations that African Americans made to the institution of Jim Crow during my time, and prior to that, the slave institution itself. We've always been a resilient people in being able to adjust to changing conditions, and often oppressive conditions, conditions that restrict our creativity, restrict our ability to move freely and to do those things that we're capable of doing. This pandemic has placed restrictions on us, just as that kind of societal imposition of oppression placed restrictions on our people. Growing up in the Jim Crow era, we were, of course, relegated to having to take a secondary position to others in our society who innately had no more talent or ability than we did, but we simply weren't able to exercise them and have the opportunity to have the outlets to express ourselves and all the things that we are capable of doing. It is like observing today, we have all of these professional athletes, and they're able to compete in the National Football League, in the National Basketball Association, and baseball, as we're going through the World Series right now. And we see that when given the opportunity to compete on that athletic stage, academic stage, or whatever, African Americans are able to do so, but they had to be resilient in past times. There are more opportunities today. In the past, people just weren't allowed to do what they could do based upon the fact of deliberate reduction of African Americans' potential in our society. Well, resilience requires that people come up with their own institutions, design them. And so we have historically Black colleges and universities, and they really did a tremendous job in educating our people and preparing our people for the days to come. We now see that we need those institutions again because we face racism, and so many of our young people, as I listen to them, are choosing, for instance, to attend a historically Black college and university over one that is not so identified because they believe that they will be nurtured, they will be encouraged. So that's a form of resilience and being able to make that choice now, when all along we were out in the 50s and 60s and promoting the notions of desegregation and going to schools that were majority white. Now we find that there's this resilience on our part to say, look, I have an option. If I don't want to go through all that I have to go through at a campus where I might not be treated as warmly, I might not be received in the same way. Today, our young people are opting. They opt to go to historically Black colleges and universities. So we have that kind of occurrence going on. That is directly, I think, a result of institutional racism and people feeling that even when we go to places where we're able to compete, we still don't get the nurturing, we don't get the support, don't get the feeling of really being welcomed at particular places. That is going on today in the midst of all the other things we're dealing with the pandemic. We see how African Americans rise to positions of authority and how they are treated once they are in those positions. We have situations going on in our own community right here in Little Rock. I've never seen people come down on a police chief the way they have come down on Chief Humphrey here in Little Rock. I want to use examples of things because these are things that I think implicate our need to be resilient. We have to stand up. We have to impress upon our young people that there's still a fight out here on just basic respect for the authority that an African American exercises when he or she is elevated to a particular kind of position, as we have here. And people criticize and say, you know, I see so many people prominent in our community saying this chief should resign, for instance. And my question is, for what? What has he done? What's improper? What policy has he instituted? What action has he taken that would implicate a need to resign from office? What law has he broken? What provision of policy book has he violated that would implicate that? We have that going on. At the same time, we're dealing with this pandemic. And so it does require a certain kind of resilience, because in this pandemic, we're required to restrict ourselves for safety reasons. We have to be safe. We have to social distance from people. We have to wear masks, cover our faces in a way that's uncomfortable. We have to reduce the kind of activities that we're accustomed to participating in. We don't go out as often. We're careful when we go to a grocery store. You know, we're careful about going to a funeral. I was at a service this afternoon that I delivered a eulogy, but you know, it was a graveside service. Ordinarily, this person, who's very, very devoted member of our congregation, would have been funeralized there. He grew up in this church. He was 95 years old. But our resilience teaches us that, well, we've got to make that adaptation to what we have to do in order to be safe. So immediately we start coming up with ideas of how we're going to carry out this service. How's it going to be done? Will there be invitation only to people who are attending the service. I've never heard of so much of that in the African American community before. Invitations to a funeral. And the last one I think I'd had in person at the congregation at the sanctuary was also basically invitational. There were a lot of more people than those who were at this graveside service, but these are the kinds of adjustments that we're making because of this pandemic. That has to have some psychological bearing on us. And I'm so glad that so many of you are now psychologists, because we need them to help us cope with this situation. We don't get to attend our churches the way we normally would, which is a place of fellowship. We don't get to attend our fraternity or sorority or club meetings, or some are in various activities such as that. So we have to be resilient and come up with ways of finding these outlets for us to be entertained and for us to have social contact. Thank God for the technology, the fact that we are able to have these Zoom meetings. One thing that, and I'm going to talk a lot more about what I'm going through since I'm not a psychologist, and I just have to speak to some of the things that I see as an indication of our resilience. One good thing is I've reconnected with a lot of college classmates from a long time ago. We have a Zoom meeting on Saturday afternoons. I mean, some of us hadn't been in touch with each other for 50 years almost. And we've started doing that. And it's been an opportunity where people have caught up with one another. We've talked about what we've done over the last 50 years and what's going on with our families and where people are. And it's really been a wonderful kind of outlet, but that's the resilience that we have to have in order to make it and to cope with what's going on. I am deeply concerned about matters such as the uptick in violent crime in our communities. Now, some want to say that this has something to do with the pandemic and people not being able to cope in normal ways, and people having short fuses and tempers as a result of the anxiety that we have behind this pandemic. That there is a lot of stress on people. There's stress when parents have to figure out a way to keep their kids at home and have them educated rather than sending them to school. There's stress, economic stress placed upon parents who have to spend more on childcare as a result of the fact that the kids are home more often than they used to be, because from time to time, the schools are not having in-person school education. We're back to in-person in our school districts, but for a period there, that was not the case. So parents had to be more concerned about, how am I going to make provisions for these kids? How am I going to spend more money on food for them, because they're at the house and they're going in the refrigerator, as opposed to being at school where they may get a free lunch or they may get some snacks or something like that. That's money that the parents have to come up with. And I think that we're making these adjustments, but they're not easy. Anytime that we're restricted from doing the things that we've become accustomed to doing, or we're boxed in and we're told that we can't do certain things, that has impact on people. My wife was talking about a lady that she used to see over at Dunbar, and they have some senior citizens who gathered over there. Not to say that my wife is part of the senior citizen group, but she just gathered over there. She gathered over there too. But one lady was 93 years old, and her son was saying that she really, really misses being able to go to Dunbar every year. Now, how do we become resilient with a 93-year-old who saw that as a daily outlet for her life? It's her social contact with people. And so how does she entertain herself? How does she feel a sense of community? Often those who are that age, I can't speak for her, but usually some that age just aren't into technology. They're not attending a lot of Zoom meetings. They're not using the internet as much. And so we've got to find outlets for them. And as African Americans, again, we are accustomed to making adjustments. And I think on the whole, we're doing a pretty good job. I hope that we don't have an outbreak of even more crime. One thing that I am concerned about with this pandemic, Dr. Tolliver mentioned it, employment issues. At one point, there were figures that suggested that 20 million jobs have been lost, and probably a disproportionate number of African Americans. So what happens during that, and especially once the stimulus money runs out and the unemployment benefits also come to an end? What happens when that occurs? And we, again, have to find ways of being resilient. So churches, community groups, and others have to have food banks. We have to make provisions and really look out for our seniors to make sure that they are fed. And then lastly, before you move on to something else, there's this confusion out here. Now, this is more difficult for me to understand. All this confusion about whether or not a person should be vaccinated, or whether or not a person should wear a mask. I think it is impacting our community because we have some young folks who are anti-vaxxers. I don't know how they get to be there, but we have some who are rejecting what we commonly refer to as the science in this. I don't know how we're going to reach them and overcome what's being promoted in certain peer groups. That is something that I hope that we can address, because I think that's a drawback, and it reduces the real opportunity for herd immunity and for us to get rid of this so that we can get back to normal. The longer people reject the science of this and don't do those things which we believe are the necessary steps to combat this virus and get rid of it.
Thank you, Reverend Judge Humphrey. Both you and Dr. Bill Tolliver have given us some rich content here. A lot for us to start to unpack, as the young people say. I'm going to make a few remarks, but I certainly want to invite our listening audience to submit questions, comments, and Dr. Carla Holmes will be assisting us with that. So Dr. Holmes, just let us know when those questions start to come in. Both of you address the strength of the collective systems, the family, the extended family, the community, the church. And during this period of time, of course, we are not able to gather in person, but we are adaptable. Adaptability is an element of resilience, and you both articulated those elements of resilience that we are pivoting to, even when we cannot gather as we traditionally gather. The Zoom connection, technology has allowed us to be able to connect when we can't in person. I think one of the areas where we have especially been impacted, and that is not able to gather in our house of worship and together for the rituals that we as a people usually go through at a time of a transition with funerals. And it has taken its toll. We see the impact, especially on those who are isolated, those who are in their golden years and live alone. And as pastors, I'm sure that you have seen this in your congregations. Could you address how you are attending to those needs of our senior population. And then we're going to move on to some other areas, but that is a vulnerable population right now. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. And I would just like to share that um, I'm going to start from that small micro perspective, looking at it from uh, our own church, Pleasant Hill Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. One of the things that we did almost right off the bat, we had no use of technology at the time. So I was so amazed at the ability of just a small group of people, because our church is very small. But within that, we looked at what strengths we had. Well, lo and behold, we had someone who worked for UA Little Rock in under the Mid-South systems and was a technology expert. She helped us within 2 weeks to gather our skills to be able to come onto Zoom, to go to Facebook, and now we have the ability to return to church physically and virtually. So specifically for those people who are uh, able to get on, even though they're senior citizens, but there are other people who have those situations because of their illnesses that have always had a need to receive services in a different way. Now we're able to reach them by way of technology. And so we utilize that. We also utilize GroupMe. We utilize our texting and conference calls to be able to remain connected with each other. We have a COVID-19 safety team that has done an outstanding job. In fact, they insisted not just on renting one of those cleaning machines for sanitizing the air, they purchased one. And and then they spaced us out in social distance so that even though our church is small, we seat 250, we only have a very few number of people. So they not assigned, but they designated where you could sit, where you could not sit. They take temperatures, all of those kinds of things. So people can come back into the sanctuary if they feel healthy enough to do so. But if they don't, they're able to be virtual. I do want to also speak to that issue, though, about people who can't come. So it's important for pastors and for church members as a whole. We have what you call class leaders to make sure that they're making contact with the members within the church congregation in some type of way. So class leaders, pastors, everyone stays in contact with each other so that the members of the congregation will not feel lost. There are some of us who are introverts, as you know, and we have no problem with staying indoors almost 24/7. Then there are others who really, really do need the interaction with people just to breathe and just to, exist. So we want to make sure from a congregational standpoint that we meet at both ends. From a Christian Methodist Episcopal connectional, we've had more virtual meetings than anything else. So a lot of people have learned how to Zoom and all of that, but we can't take that for granted. So we must make sure that we stay connected with the populations so that they can feel warm and welcomed. And even to host outdoor events, such as probably many churches did just recently with Hallelujah Fest or with fall festivals or something, so that they can come together. We saw more people in our fall festival or Hallelujah Fest this Saturday than normally come to church. But I think that's very, very important. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. That really ties into the point that you made, Reverend Humphrey, about the creativity of our people. These are experiences in churches that we've never had before in order to be able to connect. We are a creative people, and that certainly is a resilient factor in terms of staying connected. And even for those who are more private, more introverted, more contemplative, perhaps in their worship practices, it allows them the option to connect in a safe way in which they're comfortable. Thank you for sharing all those creative ways that you are doing to bring about togetherness as a protective factor, connectedness with your congregation and the community. Judge Humphrey?
Well, we experience the same thing in our congregation. In fact, I tease the lady who does our IT there. And everybody's volunteer basically, except me, I get something, but most other people are volunteers. And I tease her, I said, you've been attending church more like you did when you were growing up and your parents had you to go, she said. We laughed about that. She said, I've been to church more lately, because she had to put it together for us so that we could have live streaming. And I also tease with folks in my congregation because we have resumed in-person services as of June, the first Sunday in June. We were out for a year and some months, March of 2021 until March of 2020 until June of 2021. And I say, well, I still think some of the people in our congregation did not get the memo that we are back at church on Sunday mornings. They're satisfied, I would think, and comfortable, not satisfied, but more comfortable with live stream at this point, which is good. Now, there's some things I miss about that. I miss congregational singing, and especially from the hymn book. It's hard to get the same feel, but we've adjusted more to having fewer voices and more solos, and the musicians who are there who are spaced out. And so that's resilience. That's what we have to do, and we just have to go with the flow. There are others who, even some who attend, who would more than likely prefer not to attend. They come because they want to make sure that they do what they have to do, and with music or whatever. But people are still apprehensive about this, and don't know whenever you're going to have some kind of new outbreak to come along. So we just do what we have to do, and our congregation, I think, has been blessed, and people take seriously their relationship with the Lord to the point. I think people have continued to send in their offerings to the church. At one point, we're a lot of us are family folks in our church, and comfortable with one another. People weren't even mailing their checks to the church itself. They would mail them to the place where the treasurer was.
That's a tight connection. That is a tight connection.
That's a connection there, where you just send it to her mother's house because her mother was shut in and she was helping care for her mother. So just send it there so she won't have to come by here and pick up. We'll do it like that. And so that's resilience. That's making adjustments and being sensitive to the fact that she is doing what she's doing while having these other responsibilities. So we're going to try to accommodate her as much as possible as well. And so we try to do that. And I see that going on with congregations all over, really making this adjustment. Even as people miss that kind of fellowship that you have when you have congregational hymns. And Dr. Griffin, if I may make this personal point, one of your aunts was minister of music at the church that I grew up at, St. Paul Baptist Church in Pine Bluff. And so we used the hymn book quite a bit. And so you missed the hymn book with the congregation. And I remember something she would do on every Christmas. We used to have church on Christmas Sunday morning.
I remember those days.
Christmas morning. it might not be a Sunday morning, but Christmas morning, at some point, every Christmas morning when we were at church, she would just turn to the audience and say, everybody stand up and get a book and sing Silent Night. Now, I don't think you can't get the feel for that when you're social distancing and you're live streaming, but you know, we still do what we do.
The congregation, the power of relationships, that's another element that you all have addressed. The power of relationships and within the African-American congregation, within the African-American community, as a protective factor and also as a strong factor of resilience. We have a couple of comments in the chat. Dr. Holmes, will you assist with the chat remarks, please? I'd like to call on these younger psychologists. They can read that fine print better than I can.
Yeah, no worries.
We have a comment and we also have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think just some of the comments, just similar to what you all were saying, just people using creative ways of being able to connect and get together online, people getting accustomed to doing things virtually. So having virtual family reunions, family history calls, family Bible studies. So people have been finding very creative ways to connect, which does promote resilience during this time. Also commenting that many of us are first users at using this technology, but many were resistant, but our determination, resilience helped us overcome our various reasons, choose to use technology and come together. So yeah, so even though some people were resistant or had a difficult time, just kind of really using the technology, found ways to overcome, which definitely is an aspect of resilience.
Persistence of the spirit, persistence of the spirit. Yeah. And I think we have a question in the chat, don't we?
So the question is, how do we continue to be resilient without suffering from burnout? Can one be resilient and be burned out, or is it an oxymoron? So yeah, this idea of resilience and burnout.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
I think that, from reading that one, I believe that burnout comes with the use of so much technology from time to time. And that might be what the individual was referring to. I'm sure that Ms. Kenya will explain that a little bit more if I'm inaccurate on that. But I think that it's important to do something that I discovered in a play therapy article just recently, and that is to recognize that there are times when you need to set some boundaries and set some limits on things, on groups, on additional resources. I have found personally that after I'm seeing clients for a number of teletherapy sessions, and then I'm doing other types of sessions by way of Zoom. This Saturday, I have 2 events. I had to cancel a third because there were too many conflicts. Then, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So again, what I just said was I had to cancel one thing, which was very important. But we need to recognize that just because we're available by Zoom, it doesn't mean it's always healthy for us to always be on, because it does require just as much energy as something else. So it helps to recognize what your own limitations are. They're different for different people. Like Dr. Griffin can be on 24/7. I can't do that. But as you are recognizing what your limits are, you are helping to pull yourself back into that healthy confine. And so you're then able to give more in a better quality to the relationships that you have and to the services that you need to provide. So limits and boundaries are okay. And that's different from just saying, I only want to do it this way all of the time. If you don't bend in some way, you can break. And that's why I love that need from the strength from that African perspective, to be flexible, to be adaptive, to be resilient. And so as we're doing that, then we can help others. I did want to just mention, before I get in trouble, that at our church, once we became able to be virtual and to be in our church again, my own sister, Lorna Cross, was able to then take part of that technology, come back into the church and be a part of that. And so I think that the other strength that I have found during this time, the piece of resilience, is people are able to utilize resources maybe they knew they had, but didn't share with others. And so that is extremely important. And even right now, as we're talking, there are a number of family members who are on our Zoom meeting session. And we have come together even more on a regular basis now than I think any other time in our career. Both sides of the family are represented. And so that's a wonderful thing that you can do even within your own family connection to help you to stay alive, to stay vibrant, and feel a part of this world even during this time. The last thing I wanted to mention is that doesn't always happen when you're meeting with the majority community. And Judge Humphrey was talking about the issue about to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. I had to attend as a part of one of my other responsibilities, a 2-week program in a different state and intensive training. And Judge Humphrey, I was the only person who wore my mask, and everyone wanted to sit socially close because they wanted to be connected. Well, that's not even me on a good day. But as I became more comfortable with saying, you know, I need these 2 spaces on side of me to be open, and I am going to wear my mask, you know, those kinds of things. I had to say it to myself to feel comfortable. Then I was able to open and be more willing to learn what I needed to learn. But sometimes, you know, when I was younger, I probably would not have been comfortable doing that. And so we have to know how to be able to navigate in this new world, whether they're African-American anti-vaxxers, or whether they're majority anti-vaxxers. It doesn't make any difference. You die anyway if you become exposed. And so in our learning how to be resilient, we have to learn what is okay and comfortable for us to be able to continue to do what we need to do in this world.
Thank you so much. And self-care is certainly a part of that. We have all had to balance and not overextend ourselves during this pandemic and during what is happening nationally in our country. The time is going by so quickly. We have just a few minutes left. I would like for each of you to prepare just brief closing comments. It looks like we may have about 7 more minutes. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We have representatives from the families of both of our presenters tonight. The Bell family's in the house, the Humphrey family's in the house. Hello, Mrs. Humphrey. Loving, supportive spouse. Thank you. Thank you. And there may be other family members joining by Facebook, because both of you model the strength of the family for what you bring from your lived experiences. And this is why this conversation is so rich tonight, because it is what you have lived throughout your lives generationally. And personally, I feel very fortunate. I knew Dr. Bell Tolliver's father, and I really didn't know he was her father until later on. I said, "Oh, Reverend Bell was your father?" And found out I knew other relatives. And I knew Judge Humphrey's grandmother, his mother, his community. So those are families that I have personally, personal transparency, Your families have given strength to me and my family as well as others. And that's a resilient factor. And we are very appreciative to you and also to your families. So for the next few minutes, the time, 5 minutes, if you could each give us a wrap up. And do we have any other questions, Dr. Callahan? Do we have any other
Nope.
questions from Facebook?
No other questions at this time.
All right. Judge Humphrey.
Well, I think that we are continuing to make an adjustment, and maybe that's good for young people to see that life isn't just lived in a straight line all the time, that we have to make some moves. There's some twists, there's some turns, and we just have to be able to cope with these. And I hope in particular, our young people are able to make that adjustment. And elderly people are having to make an adjustment too. I was reading one article about this impact from psychologists, and they talk about how simple things such as whether or not an elderly person can go out and get groceries may not be the case now, because they're concerned about going into the stores and being exposed to things. On the other hand, those of us who still have a lot of elderly people, and when I say elderly, more elderly than I am, we have to be concerned about people coming into their homes and what they've been exposed to. And Dr. Griffin knows my mother's 98 years old. So if there are people who sit with her and they decide that they're going on a vacation, then you've got to have questions in your mind, and you can't pry with people, you have to respect their personhood and what they have to do. But you wonder, where'd you go? What were you exposed to? Did you attend big gatherings? Because you'll be back in the home. And we just have to pray. That's all I say. We have to pray. Our young people, I think, have had an easier time making adjustments to the technology that you have to have. But on the other hand, I'll share this with my son. In starting him out he's starting out in practice. I was thinking the other day where he could make a plea on behalf of a client through Zoom, but I really wanted him to go to the courtroom. And just to get the feel of what goes on and how you work with the staff of judges. I saw Judge Kathleen Bell on a while ago. There's sort of a culture around the courthouse. I think that the new lawyers may miss a little bit of that. Now they're up on the technology. They can use this stuff very easily. And Zoom meetings are all right, but when you learn how to deal with the clerks and with the trial court administrators and all of these people, unless you have some kind of personal contact with them, you don't get the same feel for practice. And so hopefully we'll be able to resolve those kinds of problems.
And again, the power of relationships. Relationships are very empowering and also powerful. Dr. Bell Tolliver, your closing remarks. Thank you, Reverend Judge Humphrey.
Yes, and thank you so much again for inviting us this day. Just a couple of things. I want to just remind us that while many families do have resilience opportunities and they're becoming more resilient, there are families who struggle because they've had more barriers. Some people have not been taught resilience capabilities. And so whether you're family members that are therapists or you are pastors or whoever, it helps to provide opportunities for people to be able to learn how to develop those strategies for themselves, as well as to build into children and people who they are assisting. Help them learn how to regulate their own bodies, their own states, so that they will be able to manage the stress that they face in life, whether it's in school or whether it's in social engagements. Help them learn how to verbalize and increase their vocabulary to express, this is how I'm feeling. There are a number of people who, unfortunately, children and teens who are actually contemplating or actually succeed even in committing suicide during this time simply because of the trauma that they're experiencing, and they don't have a number of options. On the other hand, there are people who experience adversities within their own families. And so I just want to say, those of us who are in the helping profession especially need to remember to provide those strategies to be able to help people to build resilience and build strengths, protective factors into their own lives. Thank you again for allowing me to be able to speak this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Very powerful tools. And a reminder of the resilience that lies within our African-American community, our African-American churches, our African-American families, and as always, not to forget those who may not be the beneficiaries of family systems, to reach back and bring others along. No one should be forgotten. We thank you both for spending the evening with us and sharing from your rich experiences, both as pastors, as in the legal field, in the mental health field. This has been very rich, very empowering, very powerful. Thank you. And we thank those who joined us by Zoom and Facebook. I invite you to join us the first Monday in December. We will have an author who has written on childhood depression, Dr. Bell Tolliver. She's from St. Louis. And we will also have a child psychologist addressing childhood blues, because this is a reality with our young people: depression, suicidal thoughts, and sadly, successful suicide attempts. And this is a painful topic, but it's a topic that we feel morally and ethically responsible to bring to our listening audience. We will have that the first Monday in December. Ms. Carla Holmes is our guest artist, our guest author, and Dr. Karen Moore will be our child psychologist. We plan to continue our series next year in 2022 because of the need in our communities. We're still living through this pandemic. And racial tension is rising, as well as what we see on the socio-political scene. And as a community, we draw strength from coming together so that we can discuss openly, addressing the needs in our community and looking for tools that we can build upon to provide some protective factors. Thank you again. We pray God's blessings upon you and blessings of this Thanksgiving season, and be safe.